I have identified another member of the Illuminati here. So these people are extremely wealthy. They are related to people like Stanley Kubrick. If you want to look at Stanley Kubrick's house in England, it's called Child Whitbury Manor. So Stanley Kubrick, probably one of his sons, took over that name. And that is Anthony Hopkins. So he knows how to put in contacts and dye his hair. He could change his appearance completely and become Stanley Kubrick #2. So until you put the two photos up next to each other, a lot of people are not going to believe me. But I figured a lot of this out with having to deal with these people constantly stalking me and transforming into a number of different identities. One of these identities that they will approach me under is the name of Peter Savarine. So Peter Savarine, he was my father's friend, and he worked at the Bartlett Arboretum in Stamford, Connecticut, which is something like a nature center, and he was the executive director there. So my father referred me to him when I needed a job. So Peter Savarine isn't a single individual. These rich people that are involved in the media, that are involved in Hollywood, that are involved in the government, they're not going to show up day after day and act as Peter Savarine, a director of a nature center. It might be fun for them to act like that for a day or two or a week or two, but then somebody else in their family is going to have to come over and act as Peter Savarine, and to see what they could get away with interacting with me. So a lot of people don't understand that these people are extremely psychotic and cruel, and it's not cute. if you have a pack of these men who are bisexual, they are homosexual, and they are attracted to straight guys, I think what they refer to it as is hunting. And if they could eventually get the straight guy into a situation where he's drunk and, like, I don't know, hanging out with them at their house and he wants to crash on the sofa, or let's say he picks up a drug habit and he's at their mercy like that, or he goes to the wrong bar, which is one of the bars that they own, and you're in there drinking with a bunch of agents from the MK Ultra program. They could easily jump you, take you down to the basement, and then they do the most cruel things that you could possibly imagine. And I guess most of that involves burning people. They have a big thing with burning people. So these people are beyond evil. They're beyond psychotic. These people are something like subhuman creatures to do this to people. And this is your Illuminati. So I would like to take the time today to address one of these agents of the MK Ultra program, one of these professional actors that come from an extremely wealthy family. I believe that he is related to Anthony Hopkins, also known as Stanley Kubrick #2. So I first recognized this individual as Peter Savarine, and this individual likes to change his appearance and take on a disguise of a black person. And one of the people that he acts under is a physicist named Neil deGrasse Tyson. So if you do a search on YouTube, you could find this individual called Neil deGrasse Tyson. And he's supposed to be quite a character, I guess kind of humorous, as he explains physics to people. Quantum physics, or theoretical physics involving space, for example. He just makes it fun. Another identity of Christopher Reyes, also known as Peter Savarine #1, also known as Neil deGrasse Tyson, is Tyrone Binskin. And Tyrone Binskin was first recognized in the movie 300 about Sparta. And he played the emissary. He played the Persian emissary that came to threaten the Spartans. He came to threaten the Greek soldiers. And if you look him up, it says that he is a former member of the House of Commons in Canada. And that's something like the Canadian Parliament. And according to the internet, it says that the House of Commons scrutinizes government through its committees. So Peter Savarine #1, also known as Neil deGrasse Tyson #1, also known as Tyrone Binskin #1, is also known as Christopher Reyes. And he is supposedly the older brother of Albie Reyes. And Albie Reyes went to Brookfield High School in Connecticut. And that is where I met Albie Reyes. So I always say #1 because these individuals continuously change their identity as they play hundreds of different characters. If you watch a Mel Gibson movie, sometimes there's going to be 10 different men all acting as Mel Gibson just to get the lines all right. So I used to think that, hey, if I identify one of these guys with a professional actor like Mel Gibson, then I've pegged him. But what I was doing was I was saying that this individual is this one actor, when in reality 10 different men have acted as Mel Gibson. 10 different men have acted as every professional actor that you know about. Think about all of your favorite actors right now. Think about the actors that are in all of the big movies. You continuously see them again and again and again. I'll use Mel Gibson as an example. In 2022, Mel Gibson was in 6 different movies. He was in Last Looks. He was in Panama, Agent Game, Hot Seat, Bandit, and On the Line. So just in the year 2022, he was in 6 different movies. So if you identify somebody, if you work for a Peter Savarine, and one day you say, you know what, I recognize this guy as Mel Gibson. What I've learned since I started this is that sometimes there's going to be 10 different men all acting as Mel Gibson. So the first thing I did was say, hey, I'll narrow it down to a certain movie. But I'm going to tell you, that helps. But these agents of the MK Ultra program, they're at the level now that they need a lot of help. They're like clones. These people have mild mental retardation. You might look at them as slow. If you meet them and you talk to them and they're in one of their little characters, they know how to hide it. But when you start to get to know these people, the first thing that will occur to you is that they're slow. These people have mild mental retardation. That is what the government, that is what the British government and the British military is looking for. They don't want their people to be too intelligent. They want their people to follow orders and depend on them for everything. They want the British government, the think tanks, the military to do all the thinking for these people. So if they're not too bright, that's an attribute. So they'll need 10 different men just to act in one movie. If one can't get a line right, they'll have somebody else come and do the line for them. So you have 5 or 10 of these people showing up like a clone army, a Mel Gibson clone army, to act in the latest Mel Gibson movie. And like I said, 6 have come out in the year 2022. So that is why I'm putting numbers along with their names. And the numbers don't exactly go with how old they are. It's the order and when they have been recognized. So I have Peter Savarine #1, also known as Neil deGrasse Tyson #1, also known as Tyrone Binskin, is also known as Mel Gibson #1. So if you look at Mel Gibson, if you look at an old movie called Mad Max that was released in 1979, in Mad Max, Mel Gibson looks around 35 years old. I think they want to say that Mel Gibson was born around 1955, but that is a lie. The first Mel Gibson, who was acting in movies like Mad Max, has been identified to be the actor Malcolm McDowell. And he was born in 1943. And he was around 35 years old in 1979 in the movie Mad Max. So I just recognized him and identified him recently, so he gets the number of Mel Gibson number 10. That's just the way things go. In reality, he should be called Mel Gibson number 1, but that's not the way it worked out. So Malcolm McDowell is Mel Gibson number 10, even though he was probably one of the first people who acted as Mel Gibson. So yesterday, which is June 27th, 2024, Neil deGrasse Tyson, also known as Christopher Reyes from Brookfield, Connecticut, also known as Tyrone Binskin, also known as Mel Gibson number 1, also known as Peter Savarine number 1, was stalking me. So I was working in Keene, New Hampshire, at one of my customers' house, and she employed me to prune all the bushes around her house. And an individual walked past that was recognized to be Christopher Reyes, also known as Neil deGrasse Tyson, also known as Tyrone Binskin. And he looked unusual. He looked very unusual in that I could not tell if he was white, black, or Hispanic. It was like he had got caught somewhere between all of those races. And he had thick Coke bottle glasses on. And he had kind of grayish white hair. It might have been a wig. And it looked a little bit like a afro. It was real curly. He looked like a black person who was an albino. There was a very odd look to him. So the only way I could put it is that this guy is a gray. When different races reproduce, their children are often very beautiful. If you got an African American man marrying a German woman, they will reproduce very beautiful biracial children. So I don't want people to get it wrong with what I'm saying. It's like this person constantly changes his identity so much, he becomes strange looking. He doesn't look like a mix between white and Hispanic, Hispanic or black. He doesn't look like a mix between white and black, or a mulatto person, or a biracial person. He looks like a freak. He looks very unusual. He looks like a creep. So here's a photograph of him. So Albie Reyes, Christopher Reyes, was supposedly a Puerto Rican. But he is believed to be related to Anthony Hopkins, also known as Stanley Kubrick. So here's a photo of Stanley Kubrick compared to Anthony Hopkins. So they change the way they appear. They do it so often, it's like the way that we change our clothes. They change the way they appear. So very often these people are going to look unusual, because this is what a gray is. They have no identity whatsoever. And the weird thing is that they use this radio frequency technology that bombards their agents with particles. And these particles manipulate their nervous systems. It sends them a bunch of information on how to change their personality, on how to speak. And it even gets into their skin and their fatty tissues and begins to change the way they appear. I've seen some of these agents that are so bad will change in front of you. They'll begin to morph a little bit in front of you. As they change personalities, their physical appearances begin to change a little bit too. And when they get older, their skin begins to look kind of swollen, kind of stretched out, because what is called plasma energy is always being directed at them. The plasma energy will travel along with the radio frequency energy, and it will get into their skin, and it will get into their fatty tissues, and over time it forms implants. It is basically alien material that's being directed at them, this plasma energy. That is as specific as I could get at this point. So that is what is used in communications, radio frequency. that is what is used in communications, radio frequency. That is how you listen to your radio. You turn on your radio and somehow you hear people's voices coming through the radio. How does that work? How do particles get sent through thin air and suddenly appear as sound on your stereo? How do these particles get sent through thin air and appear as video on your television? How do people pick up a phone and call you on a cell phone? It's all through particles that are being radiated through the air. So they do the same thing with people. So people become the receivers of all these particles that carry this information. And within the radio frequency energy waves that they direct at people is something called plasma energy. And that gets sent at the people too. And you're not going to find a whole lot of information on that on the internet, but it has to do with alien material. So these agents, they allow all this plasma energy to build up in them. And quite often it registers as brown adipose fat, brown adipose tissue. And if they get enough of this stuff in them, they know that when they are connected to somebody, this alien material works to shapeshift them to better resemble who they're trying to transform into. They really are shapeshifters, just not in the way that you think. When you hear reports about shapeshifters, alien shapeshifters, a 6-foot-tall man cannot shapeshift into a 5-foot-tall woman, but they can change a little bit or a lot. They could definitely all imitate each other to the point that you're not going to be able to tell them apart. So when I see this individual walking down the street named Christopher Reyes, also known as Neil deGrasse Tyson, also known as Tyrone Binskin, he appears unusual. It's not that he appears biracial or like a light-skinned Hispanic guy. He looks weird. He looks kind of like an alien. He's a gray. So this is probably one of the most evil people in the world. I believe that he is used as a serial killer. This type of individual will come across as being very friendly. It's like a salesman. It's like an actor. But there is another side to him. When he's triggered into anger, they could transform this guy into a demon. They could transform this guy into an alien. And he has no problem attacking people in these religious, occult, human sacrifice rituals or snuff films, because this person has also been identified to be the man known as Larry King or Lawrence King, who is quoted as being the fastest rising star in the Republican Party. He was supposed to have been employed by the Republican Party. This is Christopher Reyes, who has changed his appearance to appear like an African American man. And he was exposed in the documentary entitled Conspiracy of Silence. So in the Conspiracy of Silence documentary, they said Lawrence King worked for the Republican Party. and he was the manager of a bank called the Franklin Credit Union that supposedly got shut down by the FBI due to its involvement in money laundering or having something to do with a human trafficking pedophile ring. Lawrence King, Larry King, was working with the nearby Boys Town orphanage. He was working with the pedophile Roman Catholic priests that run Boys Town orphanage. And they were taking the children and prostituting them out to the pedophiles in that area. And Larry King would put these kids on planes even and fly them to Washington, D.C. This pedophile ring was in Nebraska, but it was Larry King's job to transfer the kids all over the United States, like to Washington, D.C., so that pedophiles in the government could have these little kid prostitutes brought to them. And according to an individual known as Rusty Nelson, a lot of these kids were being used for snuff films. After they get done prostituting the children out, they will kill great numbers of them in these disturbed snuff films or these religious occult rituals. And that was what Larry King was also employed to do, was to create snuff films. So an individual named Paul Bonacci explained that Larry King brought Paul Bonacci and one or two other young men, teenage boys, to a ranch. And Paul Bonacci and one or two other teenage boys were filmed attacking another boy who may have been a little bit younger. And Paul Bonacci said that he attacked the kid by biting his groin area. So they were doing these subhuman acts on kids, while Larry King, also known as Neil deGrasse Tyson, also known as Tyrone Binskin, also known as Christopher Reyes, was orchestrating it all. So I want you to know that all of these people, including Paul Bonacci, including Rusty Nelson, they are all involved in this. They are all doing this. Rusty Nelson, Paul Bonacci, Larry King, they all take great joy in hurting people in these snuff films and these religious occult rituals. They've been brought up in these secret societies that do these sort of things as a form of entertainment. This is the highlight to their lives. This is the only thing that they are truly interested in doing. This is what they do when they get done hunting somebody and abducting somebody. So Paul Bonacci says that he was forced into doing that, but I disagree. They have all been identified. Paul Bonacci, Rusty Nelson, and Larry King have all been identified to be professional actors and celebrities that are related to the most influential and wealthy families from Europe, such as the royal family, such as the Kubricks, such as the Rothschilds. They come from quote-unquote noble families, and they are related to the royal family, and they're all involved in this. So Rusty Nelson has been identified to be Leonardo DiCaprio. So the way I'm going to put that is that Rusty Nelson, number one, has been identified to be Leonardo DiCaprio, number one, also known as Michael Babcock, who went to Brookfield High School in Connecticut. So if you look up Rusty Nelson on the internet, I think you'll find a few photographs of him and maybe one or two videos of him, and that's going to be 2 or 3 different people acting as Rusty Nelson. But one of those people is named Michael Babcock, and one of the people he acted as was Leonardo DiCaprio. So as I explained in my documentary, Kings of the Occult, The Conspiracy of Silence documentary was done by the elite, was done by Stanley Kubrick and his sons to kind of control the situation. They became their own controlled opposition. I think a lot of information was coming out about this human trafficking ring in Omaha, Nebraska that stretched to Washington, D.C. and different areas around the country, involving the Bushes, involving Ronald Reagan, involving big names in the media, basically involving the military media establishment in the United States. There were reports coming out saying these pedophiles, these criminals that are involved in this stuff are some of the most wealthy, successful people in the media and politics, in professional sports, in Hollywood movies. So they wanted to provide their own cover by covering some of it, and at the end, I don't think much came of it. So Larry King, they said they sent him to jail, and he was ordered to pay some amount of money to Paul Bonacci, but Paul Bonacci said that he didn't collect any money from him. And once you identify Larry King to be Neil deGrasse Tyson, also known as Tyrone Binskin, also known as Mel Gibson #1, this individual didn't go to prison, obviously. And if you look up Senator John DeCamp's Wikipedia page on the Conspiracy of Silence documentary, the Conspiracy of Silence documentary is called a carefully crafted hoax. And Senator John DeCamp has written a book called Satanism, Child Abuse, and Murder in Nebraska. I have not read that book. You could read the Wikipedia page on John DeCamp. But John DeCamp has been identified to also be Stanley Kubrick #2, also known as Anthony Hopkins, and he is the main person in the Conspiracy of Silence documentary. And I think Stanley Kubrick directed that documentary as a way to provide cover for what was really happening over there. And like I said, nothing came of it. I think they even took one of the people that came forward to expose this, named Alicia Owens, and they put her in jail. But again, she's another actor. So it's just a threat saying these are the people with all the power to fight this thing, and look what happened to them. So it's a form of mind control to tell everybody it's futile. It's impossible to expose these people because they'll put you in jail or nothing will happen. But the reason they do this, the reason they create these documentaries is to provide cover for themselves, to eclipse any of the real people that are attempting to fight or prosecute these criminals who are attempting to go to the media or report what they know. It gets eclipsed on the Conspiracy of Silence documentary, which become a mind control operation to kind of put doubt in everybody's mind. It's a hoax. It's futile to attempt to attack them. It's crazy to even talk about any of this. So that is why they do that. So they tell you a little bit about what they are involved in when you hear these reports from like Paul Bonacci saying that Larry King brought him and a couple other teenage boys to a isolated ranch somewhere in California, and they were employed to attack a younger boy, including biting his groin area and then killing that boy. And then Larry King picked the kid up who had just been murdered, put him into the trunk of his car. And in one report, they either took him on a helicopter or just threw him over a cliff. I forget what it was. And Larry King remarked to Paul Bonacci, "The men with the hoods will get the body." So that is some of the activity that they are willing to admit about what they are involved in. That's why you hear about these serial killers getting arrested. And I've identified these serial killers, some who are professional actors, some which are celebrities, and they're getting let out of prison. Jeffrey Dahmer, Ted Bundy, Robin Gecht, John Wayne Gacy. All of these well-known serial killers come from wealthy families. They have many different identities, including professional actors. They're celebrities. They work for the military media establishment. And they don't spend longer than a week or two in jail, if they go to jail at all. So like I said, this individual known as Christopher Reyes, also known as Neil deGrasse Tyson, also known as Tyrone Binskin, a former member of the House of Commons in Canada, also known as Larry King, a pedophile and a person involved in human trafficking and money laundering at the Franklin Credit Union Bank in Omaha, Nebraska, also known as Mel Gibson #1. He has also been identified to be Peter Savarine #1, who worked at the Bartlett Arboretum in Stamford, Connecticut, which is something like a nature center. So for more information about that, see the documentary entitled Missing Children and Cannibal Island, where I discuss a school. I guess it had been a college with dorms that was adjacent. It was connected to the Bartlett Arboretum through a hiking trail through the woods. And for some reason, the college was shut down. I heard it was a Yukon satellite school, a University of Connecticut satellite campus. For some reason, the university got shut down, and they brought young kids over there to go to school there and I guess live in the dorms. And the kids ranged in age from being pretty young, maybe around 7 or 8 years old, to high school kids. There was a classroom at the Bartlett Arboretum, and there were 2 teachers, and they would walk the kids back and forth to that adjacent school that had once been Yukon, a satellite campus at Yukon. After they got done with the class, they would walk the kids back over to that college that changed its name to Schofield Magnet School. At one point, Schofield Magnet School had been a University of Connecticut satellite campus. And I believe they had these real young kids living over there. And that is not good to have dormitories filled with these young kids under the control of these people like Larry King, also known as Peter Savarine #1, also known as Neil deGrasse Tyson, also known as Tyrone Binskin, also known as Christopher Reyes, also known as Mel Gibson #1. This is not a good thing. I believe that those kids were involved in something like a human trafficking ring. So I started working at the Bartlett Arboretum in Stamford, Connecticut, which is something like a nature center, around the summer of 2012. So I worked in maintenance over there. I worked in landscaping over there. And in December of 2012, they began to hit me with directed energy weapons, attempting to scare the hell out of me, attempting to give me a heart attack, attempting to kill me, to put me on the verge of respiratory and cardiac failure so that they could then abduct me. I remember when I was working there in December, I was doing some work outside, whatever I could find to do, because the hours kind of reduced over there. There was little work to do, but I tried to keep myself busy to make some money. And I'll never forget, the place was completely dead. You could imagine a nature center at the beginning of December when the weather was just starting to get cold. And then a caravan of cars began to drive into the facility around the road that ran through it, right past me, as I was kind of working by the side of the road. And there was something like 30 cars that drove by. And these people were part of the MK Ultra program. And either later that day or in the next day or two, they would hit me with a directed energy weapon. And they would do that every day or two, attempting to give me a heart attack, attempting to get me to disassociate, lose consciousness, freak out, fall on the road, and then they would be able to abduct me. When that much energy is being directed into an area, it was probably terrifying everybody in that area and everybody who was connected to me to the radio frequency technology. Usually, I guess, guys like Larry King, he is employed to then abduct their target. And I think a great deal of them believe that they have to then sacrifice or kill somebody as an offering to the aliens, or what they call God. And then the energy levels are turned back to normal, and they please the God. They sacrifice somebody so the gods are happy now, and all the energy gets turned back down. Yet instead, all the energy was being directed at me. And instead of freaking out, I was using meditation techniques and a very strong will to control my fear, and to control my heart rate, and to control my breathing, and to use what is called your chakra system to handle the incoming energy. And instead of channeling the energy toward an implant, I was able to annihilate the energy by focusing it up the chakra system out of my crown chakra. And it feels like a snake coming out the top of your head. The energy hurts. You feel like you may die at times. I'll never forget how it smelled around there at that time. You could smell the aliens, which are called Dracs. They're often called reptilians, but the truth is that they are amphibians. Look up amphibians. These things are not exactly reptilians. They are amphibian aliens that live in caves, deep underground caves. They have bases underground. They have been here since the beginning of time. Just like bears began to live on this planet, just like monkeys began to live on this planet, just like ants under a rock began to live on this planet. When it was created, Dracs, or amphibian aliens, began to live on this planet. They are a reality. They do not come from a different planet. They come from here. So a big part of this is the worship of aliens. These people get possessed by aliens. They worship aliens as their god. And these aliens have altered a great deal of these families that are considered royal families. These very wealthy families from Europe. These bloodlines. These royal bloodlines from Europe. From countries like England and Germany. They have been altered by the aliens. And they now possess high levels of Neanderthal genes and alien genes. And they are not like regular people. They are extremely dumbed down. They are extremely cruel. And the only thing that they are interested in is stealing from people and then murdering them in the most cruel ways that they could imagine. And another big secret is that they then take these people who have been tortured, often by burning them. And these people are so freaked out that adrenaline has gone into their blood. Huge amounts of adrenaline has gone into their blood. And if you were to cut these people open and then drink the blood that comes out of them, you would get high from that. So these people are vampires. They also do this to cows. Some of you may have heard of cattle mutilations, where they say that they find cows that are dead with parts of their face removed, like their eyes cut out or their genitals cut out, and all the blood has been removed, and they cannot find any traces of an animal around there. So it must be aliens. Well, that is actually your government. That is actually the British and United States military torturing cows and then draining their blood using medical equipment. So aliens are not doing this necessarily. This is often done by your British and United States military. This is what they've been programmed to do by the aliens. This is what the aliens have done to themselves, as they are a cannibalistic race. That is how they evolved. That is how they are. So that's exactly what these royal bloodlines have been programmed to do through the centuries. And that is their Illuminati, or secret society secrets. That is some of their mysteries. They are all addicted to adrenaline-laced blood. And quite often, a lot of these people are on cocaine and other drugs too. So Christopher Reyes, also known as Neil deGrasse Tyson, also known as Tyrone Binskin, also known as Mel Gibson #1, also known as Lawrence King, the pedophile from Omaha, Nebraska. He is slow. He has mild mental retardation. He thinks doing what I'm describing is normal. He has no problem with doing these things to people. This is very normal to him. When you see him acting as Neil deGrasse Tyson, he comes across as being a pretty sharp guy. The Neil deGrasse Tyson character is most likely a regular person who's maybe a professor at a university in Hawaii, at a university in Canada, and that is the way that individual acts. So Christopher Reyes steals that personality, steals that way of talking, and steals the information from regular people who are pretty intelligent, and then he acts that way on the internet or on interviews. So people really like him. You're accusing Neil deGrasse Tyson of this stuff. You're saying he's these other identities. You say that you see him stalking you. You say this guy is the older brother of some guy you went to high school with. Some of this is wild claims, John. Well, first, this person known as Christopher Reyes, he is slow. He is kind of a pervert. His real personality is nothing like Neil deGrasse Tyson. That's a personality that he's ripping off of a regular person somewhere. I wouldn't be surprised if this individual rips off my personality and my information, and in some other country or on the internet somewhere, everybody's listening to Christopher Reyes' impersonation of John Harwood, and they call him John Harding, UFO expert, and everybody loves listening to that guy. Well, he's ripping off me. He's taking whatever he learns from me, and he's selling it to you. The real Neil deGrasse Tyson is a mild mentally retarded man who's involved in stalking people like me. He's involved in human trafficking rings, and I believe he is one of the most evil men on the planet who's involved in human trafficking and lynching people to death. So the last person that I have identified, Neil deGrasse Tyson, also known as Christopher Reyes, also known as Tyrone Binskin, also known as Mel Gibson #1, as being is an individual named Art Torres. So Art Torres is a member of the Board of Regents of the University of California. In fact, he is the vice chairman. And the Board of Regents bought the debt of $17 million that was owed by the San Francisco Art Institute. It's a small art school, or a nice art school in San Francisco, California, that supposedly fell on some hard times around the COVID pandemic, and it went into debt. And so this University of California Board of Regents bought that debt and became the landlord of the San Francisco Art Institute. So this Board of Regents bought the San Francisco Art Institute. So if you look up Art Torres right now on Wikipedia, you're going to see a photograph of Art Torres #2. Because the original photograph I found of Art Torres has been identified to be Christopher Reyes, also known as Neil deGrasse Tyson, also known as Tyrone Binskin, also known as Larry King, also known as Mel Gibson #1, also known as Peter Savarine #1. So after I made that identification and made plans to expose them, of course, it takes no effort whatsoever to find another agent to act as Art Torres. They'll use 5 or 10 different agents to act as everybody, every public figure. And if you think that you've made an identification, no you haven't, you're mistaken. It's somebody else, and you're crazy for thinking that. So how do you like this photograph of somebody remotely different, and he could act as Art Torres too? Because after all, you're just attempting to expose the US military and the British military that could assume any identity whatsoever. That's what they're programmed to do. They don't value individuality. They don't value intelligence. They just like a bunch of brain-dead, mildly mentally retarded agents that could transform into anybody that they want. All they have to do is turn on the radio frequency technology and connect somebody else to them. They could speak through these people that are slow. The people who are slow are taught to basically disassociate, to daze out, to daydream, to blank out. I think some of them fully black out, and you have other people speaking through them. Let's say Mel Gibson gets to be too old. We'll get Mel Gibson's son, who looks a lot like him, to act in the next movie, and if you can't get the lines right, they could have the old Mel Gibson speaking through him and handling him. So that not only happens in Hollywood and in politics, but they're doing that in American society now. So if your dad was part of the MK Ultra program and you start to expose him on the internet and discuss some of the things that he's doing and some of his odd behavior, one day your dad might not come back, and they'll have a younger guy that looks exactly like your dad show up, use your dad's key to unlock the front door and walk into the house, and then you got this absolute stranger living in the same house as you that looks like your dad, he sounds like your dad, but you've never met this person before. And this person is told that if you kill that guy in that house, we'll give you $1 million. And if there's any problem whatsoever, we'll say this is a matter of national security. This was some sort of military drill, and we want the local police department to stand down. So that's the level of problems that we have in America with this British military invasion happening. So they plan on committing genocide against America, one family at a time. They plan on moving their agents over from Europe and taking over your identities one at a time, one family at a time, because the English government, the royal bloodlines of Europe, hate America. When you revolted against them in the Revolutionary War, they never forgave you. When America improved the living conditions for people all over the planet, when America created a middle class, these royal bloodlines from Europe hated you for that. They never forgave you for that. And they are here to commit genocide on America, one family at a time. If they outright declared war against the United States, it'll be bad for business. It'll be bad press for them. That is how tyrannical and evil these European royal houses are. Like the royal family. I cannot even find a last name for them. The Windsors. The more I look at the Windsors, the more I realize that they are the Rothschilds. The Rothschild family has been merged with the royal family of England. The royal family of England, I think, are a bunch of Germans. And they are related to the Kubricks. They are related to the Hopkins. and they use a ton of different names. They even hope to use my last name one day, which is Harwood. They want to take over my identity. In the documentary entitled Anthony Hopkins and Carrie Fisher Exposed, I discuss how they've killed certain members of my family in California, the Cordova family, my mother's family, and have taken over their identities, such as my grandfather's brother, Henry Cordova. The name Henry Cordova was taken over by Anthony Hopkins, also known as Stanley Kubrick II. And I believe that his son is named Christopher Reyes, also known as Art Torres, who was the chairman, who was the vice chairman on the Board of Regents of the University of California that just bought out the San Francisco Art Institute, which I'm going to cover very soon in the documentary series entitled FBI Linked to Snuff Films. So like I said, I saw this Neil deGrasse Tyson, also known as Art Torres #1, also known as Christopher Reyes, also known as Peter Savarine #1, also known as Mel Gibson #1. Yesterday, June 27, 2024, walking past the place where I was employed to work, pruning the trees and the bushes around a woman's house. Later, I observed that individual to be following me in a white truck. It appeared to be an older white SUV. And when I pulled onto my road, he drove right into the nearby Chinese food restaurant. I live in a small town. There's 1 or 2 different restaurants in the area. And he pulled into one of them to go get his Chinese food. And I bet you his next stop would be to the house located right next door to mine, or to the condo complex located on the next street over. Because this sort of individual is an MK Ultra agent who is paid to not only stalk me, but is connected to me through the radio frequency technology, and is one of these gimps who is employed to torture me every day. As I learn to get more of the implants out and handle the energy better by doing cardiovascular exercise like swimming and running, they have now given their top agents silicone muscle implants. And their job is to sit there and press on these silicone muscle implants while they are connected to me through the radio frequency technology, giving me huge amounts of pain, making it so that I could barely walk some days. I could barely get up and walk around some days. If I sit in front of the computer and have to work for 4, 5, 6 hours, when I get up, I feel like my whole body is made of stone. Or more accurately, my whole body is made of silicone. And it's hard to walk around the house until I go out for another huge run or another swim. And then I'm relieved again for an hour or 2 before they connect the human silicone ball to me again. Also known as Art Torres, also known as Neil deGrasse Tyson. He doesn't like to work out. He's kind of lazy and stupid. He likes to sit around and eat Chinese food all day. His dad is Anthony Hopkins, and this rich little punk, instead of working out, is given every single muscle implant that is known. Instead of a woman getting breast implants, this guy's getting pectoral implants, bicep implants, forearm implants, back implants. So he looks like the Incredible Hulk when he acts as Mel Gibson or Arnold Schwarzenegger or whoever he acts as, when in reality he is a lazy, perverted psycho who tortures people for a living. And that is how these families have accumulated their wealth through the centuries. In previous centuries, they used the plasma-based implants to kill people with. As we go into the future, as we modernize as a society, they are now getting the silicone implants. So if the Palladians and people like me could connect myself to them and remove the extra plasma implants, it's impossible now when they physically installed these silicone implants. So they are telling everybody that The only thing they like to do is to cause pain, huge amounts of pain, to targets of the MK Ultra program. And they do this in hopes of one day abducting and killing you so they could then take over not only your name, but whatever you own. So they are interested in a book that I wrote. I spent 10 years of my life writing a very amusing book about high school kids. It's just a fun book about teenage kids living in America in the early 1990s. I spent 10 years writing that. At first they tried to sabotage me writing that. They thought it was a joke when I was writing that, and they would connect to me and they would try to ruin it. Once I self-published that and they realized how good it was, they want to steal that book. So right now it is on something like a blacklist. They don't want anyone to find out that book exists because they hope to one day kill me, take over my identity, and take over that book that I wrote and whatever else they think that I have of value. And that is what these families, like the royal family from England and the Rothschilds, have done through the centuries in order to get their wealth. That is what they have been taught to do by the aliens that they call God. So I want to refer you to the documentary entitled Missing Children and Cannibal Island. That is about the Bartlett Arboretum in Stamford, Connecticut. So the executive director at the Bartlett Arboretum was a person known as Peter Savarine. So Peter Savarine #1 is also known as Christopher Reyes. Peter Savarine #2 is also known as Richie Pace. He was first identified to be Richard Dreyfuss. That is one of the people that he acted as. He also acted as Paul Newman, number 2. He wasn't the first Paul Newman, but he acted as Paul Newman like in movies like The Color of Money. Recently, he has been recognized as Malcolm McDowell.
Part of the reason that China is going abroad is that it wants to soak up some of the surplus excess capacity of the infrastructure companies in China itself, which have in many cases run out of profitable projects to run. So they go overseas.
Never been away, really, anywhere. And I wasn't endowed with an overabundant degree of confidence. But I had... generous, and typical Australian sort of characteristics, really. I mean, they can bloody well tell you what they think at the same time.
So Richie Pace is the brother of my mother's boyfriend named Jim Pace. So the more I look at these photographs that my mother took hanging out with Jim Pace, I realize that the guy has blue eyes. And I realize that this is Richie Pace acting as Jim Pace. There are two different individuals acting as the same person. Jim Pace has been identified to be Robert De Niro. He acted in the movie Taxi Driver. His brother Richie Pace is identified to be the actor Malcolm McDowell. They both act as Jim Pace, who is my mother's boyfriend. This is one of the people who acted as Peter Savarine at the Bartlett Arboretum. Peter Savarine number 3 has been identified to be the slightly older Anthony Hopkins. Anthony Hopkins was born in 1937. It says on Wikipedia that he is still alive. So he is currently 87 years old. He would have been 75 at the Bartlett Arboretum in 2012. I think that he could blend in quite well with Malcolm McDowell, also known as Richie Pace, who was born in 1943, who was 6 years younger than Anthony Hopkins.
Upstairs bathroom, the wood trim. Karen took and got rid of the, what do you want to call it?
The blind.
The Venetian blind, and there's some holes from the old
I can do that.
screws. I'd rather have him do it than you, because if you fall off of that stool and get hurt, or if I fall off of a stool and get hurt,
I've already done part of it. I'm fine. I'll take care of it.
let John take care of it.
him about the lawsuit.
Dr. Hardy is my best friend.
And he says, keep it up, keep it up, keep it up. Keep fighting.
This lady is very sick, Doc. You gotta make her better so she'll like me. She needs ECT.
Nation's capital, the steps of the White House, involves some of the most respected and powerful and richest businessmen in this United States of America.
Can't do
You
that.
can! You did it for me!
Justin.
Fix it for me!
Peter Savarine number 4 has been identified to be a man named John Hines. He was one of the men who acted as the actor Mark Hamill. Mark Hamill uses the identity of John Hines in California as he approaches the Cordova family. This is my mother's family. He uses the name John Hines. He is the husband of Irma Hines. So for more information about him, I will refer you to Anthony Hopkins and Carrie Fisher Exposed. He is there working with Anthony Hopkins, also known as Stanley Kubrick, and most likely Christopher Reyes, also known as Neil Tyson, also known as Tyrone Binskin. So I would not be surprised to learn that Tyrone Binskin says his name is Tyrone Cordova, and he is the son of Henry Cordova. Number 2, Henry Cordova was my grandfather's brother, who I believe was killed when he was still a very young man, and his identity was taken over by Anthony Hopkins, also known as Stanley Kubrick. And Anthony Hopkins' son is Christopher Reyes, also known as Tyrone Binskin, also known as Tyrone Cordova, also known as Neil deGrasse Tyson. So all these individuals work together in the MK Ultra program, and one of the families that they have targeted has been my family, the Cordova family. I also believe that they have targeted my grandfather on my father's side, named Hal, H-A-L. I think his name was Harold, but he went by Hal. So he married a woman named Rowena Kelly. That's my father's mom. And when she left him, she took my father and she left him. And my father said something interesting to me in the year 2013. At that time, I was staying at a crappy apartment in Derby, Connecticut. It was the worst. The room that I rented was as big as a walk-in closet. And the apartment was a renovated basement. So it was the worst apartment that I had ever lived in. And the rent was something like $150 a week. It didn't even have heat down there. The heater didn't work too well. So my father came over to visit once that summer, and he was looking around, and he said, "This reminds me of your grandfather Hal's apartment right before he died in California." I think he lived in California. So my mom said that right before my grandfather died, he wrote my father and asked for a little bit of money. And my dad refused to send him any money. And then the next thing that she heard, that he was dead. My grandfather had died. So identifying my father, John K. Harwood Sr., to being the professional actor, Harrison Ford, my father had plenty of money. What was interesting is that my father would be out of work for a year or two at a time and still have enough money to buy houses in Missouri. I remember that my father was supposedly working at Decon. Before that, he supposedly worked at Colgate. So every day he would get on a train and go into New York City. My guess is that he was possibly going to a studio as he worked in the media. We first lived in Greenburgh, New York, and then we moved to White Plains, New York, which is a short distance away from New York City. So after he got fired from Decon, he didn't work for like a year. And after about a year of being unemployed, he bought a house in Missouri, a pretty nice house in Missouri that my grandmother moved into. So that doesn't make a whole lot of sense if you think about it. But he has been identified as the professional actor Harrison Ford. I think he may have acted as Jeremy Irons as well. My father may have acted as Sean Connery as well. So as part of the MK Ultra program, I believe that he was paid. He was ordered to approach my mother, to marry my mother, who had become a target. The MK Ultra program, the British military became very interested in certain families in the United States that they wanted to infiltrate and then take over. And the Cordova family from Anaheim, California, was one of those families. So my father, John Kelly Harwood Sr., also known as Harrison Ford #1, is the person who introduced me to Peter Savering, the executive director at the Bartlett Arboretum in Stamford, Connecticut. At that time, I was having trouble finding work. Some of the people who were calling me back acted very suspicious on the phone. It seemed like they were playing a game. One person acted like they wanted to hire me to be a painter. They instructed me what clothes to go out and buy. I needed to go buy certain supplies and certain painters' clothes. And then when it came time to start working, the guy wouldn't call me back. Another person acted like he wanted to hire me for a landscaping company. And then he began to call me up and act bizarre on the phone. After I explained to him that I had experience in landscaping, even putting in hardscapes, even working with stone and putting in retaining walls and stone pathways, he called me up and asked, did I have any experience with mulching, but do I know how to spread wood chips around? He began to sound almost hateful on the phone. So these were all agents of the MK Ultra program, and their job was to convince me that the only people that wanted to help me or give me a job was people like my dad. And so he introduced me to Peter Savering, who is an identity shared by 4 or 5 men who I believe are the most evil men on the planet, and that is Christopher Reyes, Richie Pace, Anthony Hopkins, also known as Stanley Kubrick, John Hines, also known as Mark Hamill, and possibly Stephen Avery, the convicted killer Stephen Avery. I believe all those men are related. They all come from the same family. So that was who my dad referred me to. And he gave me a job at the Bartlett Arboretum. At first they had me volunteering there. It was at the beginning of spring. And they had me doing leaf removal. And I guess around June, they hired me on at $12 an hour. And I think that was part due to me telling my father that I'm not going to go over there too often to work for free. So again, I'm going to refer you to the documentary entitled Missing Children and Cannibal Island. And what you will notice is that many of the people that I am identifying in the different documentaries, I believe are all related. All these people are related, like Noreen Gosh and Sharon Murphy and Celia Carroll, also known as the actress Brittany Murphy. So I believe that all of these people who I'm naming in these documentaries are related. That is the British military media establishment. That is where all the power is now, is in the media. So I believe that all of these people who I'm naming in these documentaries are related. That is the British military media establishment. That is where all the power is now. In the 50s, the power center, the establishment was referred to as the military industrial complex because we still had some factories then. We were still manufacturing things in the United States at that time. So that was where all the power was. These days, America manufactures very little. The English government knows that China and the third world countries will work for cheaper than Americans will. So all the industry and manufacturing has shifted to these poor countries like China and India and the third world. All the farms have shifted to South America. So the power remains only in the media. So that is why I refer to it as the military media establishment. So instead of producing great films that are getting better decade after decade, with these people in control, the films are getting worse and worse. The United States media, they have made sure that none of the productions have any intellectual value, any historical value, patriotic value. They want to eliminate any anti-establishment or anti-oppression movies unless they're aimed to kind of incite anger or bigotry. They don't want to discuss any significant times in history concerning a conspiracy or concerning the little guy standing up against the government or standing up against any unconstitutional powers. Basically, they understand that when America has been oppressed, England has been behind it. I want everybody to realize that your biggest enemy in the past, in the present, and going into the future will always be England and these royal families of Europe. These will be your biggest enemies as you try to get America back on track. England likes to act like it is a major ally of America. That is your biggest enemy. These are the people that want to enslave you. These are the people that hate America. They hate the middle class. They hate what America has done for the world. They want to rewind the clocks back to medieval times where you have the super wealthy and the super poor called peasants and nothing in between. So they have all the money, they have all the corporations, but I'll tell you one thing, these people are mildly mentally retarded. These royal houses practice incest. These royal houses are into child molestation and incest. It is all part of their programming through MK Ultra. Anybody who makes a point to try to research the MK Ultra program will soon come to the fact that sexual programming and sexual abuse is a big thing in the MK Ultra program. That is how they program their agents, is through sexual abuse. So when regular people hear about sexual abuse, they really don't think about it. When you hear of a weird uncle molesting his niece or his nephew, you're like, ew, and you don't really think about it. The truth is that these uncles are related to their nieces and nephews. The parents are also abusing the children. The children get to be teenagers and then have kids. So incest is a big part in MK Ultra. And that is what they're looking for, because these kids come out a little dumb. They're not really processing reality. They don't really care if a movie's dumb. They really don't care about human rights. They don't really care if they hear about another country being oppressed. The British government likes these dumbed down clones. And the best way to get these dumbed down clones is through incest. So that's exactly what these agents are. They're royal inbreds. And there'll be 20 or 30 of them. They call themselves cousins. And they all act as Prince William or Prince Harry. It probably started back in medieval times. The prince is supposed to go make an appearance and explain to everybody why there's a new tax. Oh, the prince doesn't feel like going. Which one of his little inbred look-alike cousins could go in his place? And then you had the monarch program. The double program was born. So that is what you are up against. These people are dumb. When I say they're mildly mentally retarded, it's not an insult. These people are stupid. When I moved to Brookfield, Connecticut, that was kind of a wealthy place to live. I had lived in White Plains, New York. My mother divorced my father and began to see my stepfather, who she wanted to open an antique store with. My dad began to pick on my mother and make it so that my mother did not like to live with my father. It was part of their tactic. And at the same time, an older guy named Wally Thiel began to relate to her by saying, I'm also interested in American antiques. And I always wanted to open up a little business. And all I'm missing is somebody that knew a little bit about antiques. And that was my mother's hobby. So they began to make plans to open up an antique store together. And the more obnoxious and mean that my father got at home, the more she realized that maybe she should be with this other guy named Wally. And he had a nice house in Brookfield, Connecticut. So as was the plan for the MK Ultra program, my mother would take her two young sons, one was 7, one was 12, and move them to Brookfield, Connecticut, where all of the worst families was all situated. And they made plans to target my mother, my brother, and I. That was their plan. Something wasn't working right in White Plains with my father in that house. I want to call that an act of God. So they made plans to move my mother out of that house and into an area where they couldn't fail. And that is how I met all of the world's villains. And they're all related to royal families in Europe. These are the most wealthy families in the world. They relocated to Brookfield, Connecticut. It was an area that they controlled. I guess they liked the Candlewood Lake. It's a giant lake in Connecticut. They all had boats. It was an area that they controlled maybe for 100 years. It should be called an MCR, or a military controlled region. And that should be known as a British military controlled region. And that's the Brookfield and New Milford, Connecticut area. So once we moved to Brookfield, Connecticut, I met all of these people, including Christopher Reyes, who was the older brother of Albie Reyes. Christopher Reyes knew how to change his appearance a little bit and then go to school as Albie Reyes, his younger brother. That is what they do all the time in MK Ultra. They have a younger agent go to school and then say, hey, do you want to hang out after school? I got my parents' car, I'll come pick you up. And then they'll have their older brother, who is 10 or 15 years older, come pick you up as your buddy from school. That is a major tactic that they do. So when you figure out that both Albie and Christopher Reyes are the children of Anthony Hopkins, also known as Stanley Kubrick, you realize why they're approaching you. They don't like the idea that their little buddy Harrison Ford couldn't do whatever he wanted to do to my mom. So there is a saying, there is a phrase, and it's pretty important. And unfortunately, it's on our money. But it's put there because it's pretty important to everybody. And there's a big truth to it. And it says, in God we trust. So I think that they, as in the secret societies, as in these royal families from Europe, are saying that money is God. Because they have all of it. So they think that they are God. They have all the power, they have all the money, they have all the control. If they want to completely take over a whole region in the United States, they could do it. If they want to empty out all those houses and move their people in, they know how to do it. That's how much control they have. They know what areas are completely under their control. And pretty soon they want all of America to be like that. And not just certain military-controlled regions. So anyway, that is their God, money. Money has a lot of power. Money has a lot of control. But these rich scumbags from Europe cannot get away with whatever they want. And that is because there is the presence of a benevolent God in our world. If there wasn't, these inbreds that consider a good time slowly barbecuing somebody while they stand around and have tea and crumpets, would have turned this world into a flaming shithole 1,000 years ago. If it was left up to these people, we wouldn't have automobiles. There would be no advances whatsoever. These imbeciles would have attempted to kill and eat the guy creating an engine. These royal families would consider that a threat, would want to attack that guy to stop his work and then consume him to get his power. That is what you're dealing with. I am not exaggerating. I am not insulting them. That is exactly what these people are like. If it was left up to these people, my guess is they would still be running around the woods somewhere. These people are creatures. That is the embodiment of their greed. That is how they get to be super wealthy, is through organized crime. To go around killing everybody, starting wars, and stealing everything. That is how they get to be super wealthy. That's the only way they do it. If there wasn't a benevolent God in our world, there would be no advances whatsoever. The reason we've had advances, such as these inventions, such as America, is due to regular people under the protection of God, our benevolent God. And in every religion, They always say there is a malevolent presence of a malevolent force, of a malevolent God. And interestingly enough, they say this malevolent God lives underground, lives in hell, and that's called Satan and his army of demons. And many of you who have looked into the Illuminati have heard time and time again that these people are Satanists. These people have sold their souls to the devil in order for them to join the ranks of the super wealthy. In order to agree to be super rich, to be a member of the Illuminati, you have to prove that you have no soul. You got to prove that you are a degenerate. You got to prove that you are a scumbag. But here is the part that people do not understand. So the Illuminati isn't comprised of people who had a regular life and then they got to college and studied finance. They got a job at, on Wall Street, became like greedy, and so they were then asked to join the Illuminati or do something evil to join the Illuminati. Some of these celebrities have said that they had reached a crossroad where then the chief approached them and said, now is time to make the decision if you want to sell your soul to the devil. Before that, he was kind of a regular guy. That's a falsehood. These people are born into these pedophile-based secret societies where they are molested as kids and programmed into this MK Ultra mind control thing. Oftentimes they are inbred. They come from super wealthy families. These people have been programmed since birth to take part in these human sacrifice rituals. They are just not like us. These people are born without souls, and they just don't care about anything but themselves and making money. And the money that they make is only used to go around and control other people. What matters most is them taking from you. They don't really care that they have 1,000 million in the bank. What they care is taking what little you have, so you have nothing, and then they could attack you or kill you. It's like, how much is enough? You don't understand. They don't like you living in your little house somewhere. These multi-zillionaires from the royal family. They want to take what little you have, and then when you're walking down the street with your duffel bag and have nowhere to go, they can more easily abduct you and kill you. So this is your invasion of the body snatchers. This is your real shapeshifters. This is how they're doing it. And this is the silent war against America by England, by the royal families of Europe. And they plan on committing genocide on America, one family at a time. And they would have been successful long ago if there was no God. If there was no benevolent force in the universe, they would have already won. So realize that we're placed at a disadvantage in many areas. But realize your advantages. Realize what you're up against. They have all the corporations, but I'll tell you one thing. These people are mildly mentally retarded. These royal houses practice incest. These royal houses are into child molestation and incest. It is all part of their programming through MK Ultra.